Hello movie people, welcome to an episode of The Cine Guy. I'm your host Steven Angulo. Let's talk film. Book adaptations. We just love those, don't we? They're super hit or miss, especially when the filmmaker decides to take much more creative freedom than needed. Occasionally it works out, like Harry Potter. Sometimes it doesn't. Artemis Fowl. But those are all fantasy in which we experience the director's vision of what they believe this universe will turn out like. But what about for realistic fiction novels where something like this could actually happen in real life? Monster, based on the young adult novel by Walter D. Myers, centers on Steve Harmon, a young black teenager who has been accused of being an accomplice to a robbery turned homicide. Now, I've read the book, or more the graphic novel version of it, so I have a general understanding of what the story is. It's a court drama that's being told from the point of view of a young teenager who wants to be a filmmaker. It's in script format. He guides us kind of like he's directing his own movie, and there's just so many references to film that any young film person will immediately understand. So, does this movie follow that format? No. It is not from his point of view. It's more from simply just ours. The narrator just points out, hey, this kid likes movies, instead of showing us, what is happening inside his head during this whole court case. And like many teen dramas, if follows his life at home, in the neighborhood, at school. But the thing about the book is, this is supposed to be his story that he is telling himself. In the movie, somebody else telling his story for him. And technically, that's not what's supposed to be happening. We're supposed to see it from his point of view. Now, I'm sure we're all very much aware of today's political climate when it comes to young people of color being accused of a crime they may or may not have committed. Yeah, it's always the same thing. The justice system is unfair, they're treated like trash, and getting that not guilty verdict is more suspenseful than it should be, pretty much. So, with that being said, how are the persecution and cops being portrayed? As evil as possible. I mean, the corrections officer asks if Steve is part of a gang, the prosecutor calls him a monster in court. So yeah, basically every white person who is not on Steve's side is evil and vile and has no heart. I mean, if this movie was from Steve's point of view, it would have made more sense because this is through the eyes of a teenager. He's scared right now. He's in a tough situation that he doesn't want to be in right now. So obviously those who want him condemned are going to be seen as his enemy and kind of worse than the boogeyman. But because from the point of view of a film director who is well aware what's going on today, it has to fit the narrative of BLM or ACAB and all that stuff that's going on right now. Now, the one part that really sticks with me is the ending. Oh my gosh. So in the book and the movie, Steve gets a not guilty verdict. Yay! And then in the movie, we see him and his attorney shake hands because they won their case. And then he goes home, starts feeling his film equipment because he's finally free. The nightmare is over. That's not what happens in the book. Let me see. Huh? Wait a minute. In here, okay, Steve gets the not guilty verdict, but his attorney doesn't shake his hand. Instead, he tries to give her a hug and she just turns him away. That's not the same one from the movie. And while Steve is feeling relieved, a few months pass, and then he looks into the reader with his eyebrows raised and asks, "What do you see when you see me?" Could that point out that Steve could have been guilty of the crime and his attorney knew, but she didn't acknowledge it because she already did her job? So why didn't we see that in the movie? Remember the context. This book came out in 1999, long before the BLM movement took off. So if the movie was made in the early 2000s, it would have started with the book ending and let the viewer in awe, maybe Steve did do it. Oh my gosh. But in today's political climate, it has to have a happy ending. Steve has to walk free, and it has to show that he was not involved whatsoever. The movie does point out that he was standing outside the bodega before the robbery happened. But what was he doing? He was looking at the sun because, from the eyes of a filmmaker, he likes the lighting. That's not in the book. And if the movie started with the OG ending, then it wouldn't have been well received. So many black teenagers are accused of crimes they didn't commit simply because of the color of their skin. So if you made a movie centered around something like that, and the conclusion was that, okay, maybe they are guilty, then no, it would not have fit the narrative. So many black teens have been accused of crimes they did not commit. So even the slightest hint that Steve might have been guilty would never fit in today's environment. I personally believe we should have stuck with the original ending because, it leaves a lot for the interpretation. But I know what's going on, and I know that would not have been acceptable nowadays. Overall, it's an interesting drama, and it would have been much more impactful if it was its own story. But as a book adaptation, I just feel they took way too much creative freedom with this one. So my final rating is going to be 7.8 bodegas out of 10 lawyers. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a like if you did, subscribe and join the crew, and I'll see you next time for another awesome review. Also, be sure to follow the Instagram page at Cineguy Steven for more fun reviews. That is at Cineguy Steven. I'll see you there. This is Steven Angulo signing off. Read the book, people.